I try to live my life on the basis of I never want to look back later in life and wonder what if, and I never want to have the regret of like, could something have come of it if I didn't try? If the ball never gets to the hole, you're going to miss every single putt that you take.
Welcome to Mental Stillness. My name is Derek, and I'm excited that somehow you stumbled across this podcast. One of my goals when starting this podcast was to bring mental health conversations into leadership circles. Well, welcome to another episode of Mental Stillness. I'm here with Ryan Murray, so I'm super glad you're here, man. Thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, thank you so much for the invite. I'm really looking forward to this.
Yeah, if we look a bit sweaty and disheveled, we just played 18. We just walked off Pebble Beach.
Yeah.
Virtually, I should say, right?
Yeah.
So we were in our mind, we were mentally in better weather. And so we got to have a little time at the simulator, which was a ton of fun, just getting to connect and play a little bit of golf together. And so a lot of fun. So, one of the reasons, we'll get into the story, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on was just you're in the middle of kind of a story that's in the middle of getting written.
Yeah.
And a ton of uncertainty, a ton of excitement, ton of faith in yourself. And so we'll get into all of that. But why don't you share just a little bit about your backstory, maybe what led you to what you're doing now, any of that kind of biographical piece that you want to share with the audience. Let's start there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I originally grew up in Scottsdale, Arizona. And then in my early to mid 20s, I moved to Nashville, Tennessee for work. I had almost a 25-year career in sales and consulting between one retail sales company and then a business-to-business consulting company. And at the age of 40, call it a midlife crisis if you want, but at the age of 40, I just found myself incredibly unhappy with what I was doing and unfulfilled with what I was doing with work. And I had reached a point in my life where I realized that making money was not the answer to happiness, and money is just a byproduct of what we do. And I made a decision to walk away from corporate America, take an entire year away from work altogether so I could focus on reevaluating my mental health and working on my mental health and getting back to a place where I could be a better husband, a better person, and a better employee. And took a year off of work, played golf all over the country, got to go to some pretty fantastic golf courses all over the place.
Actual Pebble Beach, not just virtual.
Right? I did get to play actual Pebble Beach. Yeah. I think I played better today on the simulator than I did there in real life. And then through taking a year off of work and playing golf, I was able to network and translate that into now pursuing a career as a professional caddy, trying to work my way onto the PGA Tour.
Right on. And you're a couple of years into that journey, right?
I am, yeah. Yeah, this is year 2 trying to work on the Ferry Tour full time. I currently don't have a player that I'm hired by or working with full time. I'm in the process of trying to find a player that I can work for the rest of this season.
Yeah.
So,
and I want to get into just what that looks like, because that's going to be very new information. On this podcast, we've had the player side of it,
yeah,
but the caddy side of it will be an interesting take. Before we get to that, though, I would love to hear a little bit, you talked about the mental health, and this is a leadership and mental health podcast. So I guess what were some of the warning signs that you started noticing, like, I'm not myself anymore in this job, that kind of pushed you out? I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'm generally speaking a pretty happy-go-lucky, pretty laid-back, easygoing person. But I noticed that I was starting to become very demanding at work. I was, very short-tempered with employees. I was very short verbally with employees. I started leaning into becoming verbally abusive with employees that worked with me. And then, the biggest indicator was just my life at home. So my relationship with my wife was starting to become strained, and I wasn't terrible. Like I've never like abused my wife or anything like that. But, you get to a point where you have a relationship and everything works well and you communicate well with each other and things are happy. And then when I started having mental health issues, I realized that I started becoming very aggressive towards her and just like, reactive towards her. And I would say little things, little comments here and there that were just like not normal for me or not necessary. And so once I realized that I was starting to have a negative impact on my relationship at home, that's when it was really like, I have to do something completely different, because my wife doesn't deserve this. She's been nothing but supportive and she's nothing but fantastic. And there's no reason that I need to be this way.
by the time you had that realization, do you feel like she'd already been seeing those signs as well, and it took you a little bit longer to catch up?
No, I think her and I are pretty in sync with that, and I think that we were going down that path at the same pace, and I think we recognized it at the same amounts of time. Um, we had lots of conversations. You know, that's one of the things that I love so much about my wife and our relationship is that we have just incredible open conversation and dialogue when it comes to her happiness and my happiness and what she's going through and what I'm going through. And, you know, we had these conversations for years leading up until that point, and it had finally reached a point where the conversations between the two of us had switched to now, okay, we've addressed that there's an issue and we know that we need to do something. Like we have to actually do something about it now. So
So you go and you have that conversation. So take us back to that moment. Like, what was your pitch to get her to, I guess, to be on board with this vision of taking a year off, going and playing, pursuing,
yeah,
golf full time?
I'm sure this is what every husband wants to be able to listen to right now is how did you convince your wife to let you take a year off of work and play golf around the country?
You see me taking notes. That's why.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a fun conversation for sure. I think my 20 plus year career in sales may have helped me sell this to my wife, but it basically boiled down to I knew I needed to leave the position that I was in working for the company that I was with. But I was in such a bad place mentally that I think we both agreed that if I just transferred from one job to another job, it wasn't going to fix the problem. The problem was the mental health side of it. And the only way that I felt like it was possible for me to reach a point where I could solve that mental health crisis was to just get away from having to work and taking that year off. Now, at the time, I had been doing golf social media on my own, and I was, experimenting with trying to create a brand and turn that into a business. And so that allowed me to be able to have a little bit different angle to have that conversation with. Whereas, it wasn't, I just want to sit on the couch and play golf and do nothing. It was, I want to see if I can turn this into a business with what I'm doing on social media. And if I can, then that would be my source of income going forward. So I think that played a massive factor in it because there was the potential for income to come back into the house without me having to work a normal 9 to 5 job. And we also made we agreed on a hard deadline. I would get 12 months. Like that was it. It was August and I had until the following August. And if I wasn't able to monetize the social media aspect of it, then it was, go back to being an adult, suck it up and go get a real job.
And so then you went all in that 12 month and you got to go and play some incredible places, right?
Yeah. So I did a little bit of math. I figured out, how much money would it take to, over the course of 12 months, what was the dollar amount that, like a salary or like expenses would cost for the two of us. And so I was fortunate that I had a large savings built up from, the career that I had. And I was able to take a chunk of money out of that savings and give it to my wife and say, hey, listen, like, here's this money. This is what I'm going to use to like compensate for a salary for this year while I'm doing this. And then once that money runs out, then it's, now it's got to go back to work. So
there's a lot of different avenues for full-time golf. You mentioned social, and I want to get into your social and just that, but like when did you start honing in on the caddy lane?
Yeah. So my thought process going into the year off of golf was because I was doing the social media and I was already networking and making connections. I had it in my mind that I wanted to be able to do something in the golf space if I had to go back to working a normal job. So it was in the back of my head. I would say this, like the initial plan was let's make a business off golf social media for myself and create a brand. If that doesn't work out, maybe I'll be able to network and meet people within the golf space that will open up a door to working a normal job, but have that be in the golf space. So it was kind of like a side quest sort of. And then I actually ended up helping a couple guys that have a fairly popular YouTube and social media page, film one of their YouTube videos. And I've talked about this with other people as well, but Adam and Connor are two guys that have a page called the Divot Dudes. And they were filming an episode with a guy that was a professional golfer. And when he wasn't playing in tournaments, he would caddy part-time just to try to earn some money here and there. And throughout the course of helping him film that YouTube video, I was able to talk to this gentleman that was a professional golfer and say, hey dude, like, I think that would be fantastic if I could get into caddying. Could you put me in touch with the place that you work at here in Nashville? And he, without hesitation, was like, yeah, let me send a text message to the caddy master. And so I just kind of fell into it. Like it wasn't that my intention was to leave corporate America and go be a caddy full time. but I'm very optimistic and I'm very open
Well,
to
your gift of
possibilities.
networking led you to that, it sounds like,
Yeah,
too.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So then you kind of go that direction. And so talk us through a little bit. So you're in, is this the second season? You're
This,
kind of going and showing up
yep.
all over the place.
Yeah,
So
this,
talk through what that looks like. Like what's it mean to be a caddy that doesn't have a normal player that you're attached to?
yeah, so it's very difficult. It is a physical and a mental and a financial grind for sure. When you're trying to work for professional golfers, it is very much so a networking situation, and you have to be in front of people. Like you have to be on site, you have to be at tournaments for people to even know who you are, to put a face to a name, to have an opportunity to have conversations with you. And so, for me right now, the first 6 golf tournaments of the Corn Ferry Tour season, they're all outside the United States. They're in foreign countries. And so I had made a decision at the beginning of this year that I wanted to go to the first 6 tournaments outside the US, knowing I didn't have a player and hoping to work for somebody at each tournament, but then also maybe translate that into that person then maybe wanting to keep me for the rest of the season. And so I spent the first 2 weeks in the Bahamas. What a terrible place to go try to be a
Suffering,
caddy. Yeah.
especially in the winter.
Yeah, so we spent 1 week on the island of Nassau, 1 week on the island of Abaco. I did not get to work for anybody the first week. I did get hired actually for the second week, which was amazing. The golfer that I was with that week was incredible, super fun to work with, played really well. And then the next 2 tournaments were in Panama and Bogota, Colombia. And I had come home from the Bahamas. Nashville had a massive winter storm.
The
My
epicenter
flights,
of the
yeah,
ice storm.
my flights got messed up going to Panama, and instead of rebooking a different flight a couple days later and getting into Panama a little late, I just decided to cancel that trip altogether. So I did not go to Panama and I did not go to Bogota, which may have not been a great decision. Like if you're not there, you can't get hired, and if you don't get hired, you can't work. So I've basically just been sitting at home for the last 4 weeks, just waiting for this weekend to come around. And in a couple days, I'll be flying to Buenos Aires, Argentina. Again, looking for somebody to help in that tournament. And then from that tournament, we'll spend the next week in Santiago, Chile. So I'm about ready to go to South America for 2 weeks.
So you show up, you sign up, you said, "Hey, I'm available." How does word spread? I know it's a small network, but how do people know the caddies that are available?
Couple different ways that I go about it, and this might be part of my learning process, and maybe I need to do something different going forward, but there is a small network of other caddies that are already working for players that I know and that I'm in touch with, and I text message them or call them and just ask them if they've heard of anybody that is looking for a caddy that week. I reach out to players directly as often as I can. I have access to be able to see which players are going to be in the field each week, and I can see which guys are, on the alternate list, which are guys that aren't currently able to play in the tournament, but have the ability to play if other guys get sick or injured or can't make it. So it's a lot of networking. It's just, I equate it to basically like door-to-door sales, where you're just knocking on people's front doors and asking for a job, basically. And
Game of numbers, right?
It's a game of numbers. Yeah. You reach out to anybody that you think might need somebody, and you talk to them personally, or you go the route of talking to other caddies to see if maybe they've heard of other people that need a player or a caddy. And then the other thing that I'll do is once I actually get on site, I'll find out who the caddy master is at that golf course, and I'll make sure they have my contact information, make sure I meet them personally face to face, and let them know, hey, if somebody gets in as an alternate, if somebody gets in last second and they need a caddy, please get them in touch with me, or let them know that I'm available so that I can talk to them as well.
Is that how you landed the Abaco?
Actually, the way that I landed the Abaco was networking with other caddies. I was contacted by a player that was on the alternate list and asked if I could take care of him if he got into the tournament in Nassau. We ended up not getting into the tournament that week, but we went and played a practice round to prepare in case he did get into the tournament. And while we were in that practice round, I got a phone call from a friend of mine that's also a caddy, and he just happened to be hanging out with a golfer at the pool at the Atlantis resort. And he was like, hey, this guy needs a caddy for next week. I'm going to send you his contact information, shoot him a text message as fast as you can, and you'll probably have a good chance of working for him. And so literally standing in the fairway with one golfer, helping him on a practice round, I'm texting a second golfer saying, hey, I'm available if you need me for next week.
don't want to be awkward, but I'm kind of in the middle of
Yeah.
something here. Just hit this club.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, it looks like it's 150 wins off the right. I got to take this phone call real quick.
Well, here's where people who develop and cultivate relationships with the player, you know, you learn, just like in a relationship with your wife, you learn cadence, you learn communication, you know, like verbals, nonverbals. You're working with somebody, high pressure moments, and you really don't have a ton of depth or history with them. So being able to calibrate your assertiveness without having relational credibility, tell me about that.
That's the aspect of this job that I feel very well qualified, very well prepared for. I break it down to just kind of like a sales approach, right? People are only going to listen to you if they like you and if they trust you. So the two things that I try to establish right off the bat are, you know, building that relationship of you can like me, like I'm a likable person, but also building trust very quickly. And one of the ways that I go about that is I'll very directly ask them, what is it that you need the most from me this week? And different players have different needs, right? I helped one guy in Europe at the end of last year. And the thing that he wanted me to do more than anything else throughout the course of this tournament was to make sure that he stayed within his game plan. So we talked about his game plan, and then if we were on the course and he wanted to do something that was deviating from it, all I had to do was look at him and say, hey, is this part of your game plan or not? Right? Like, don't you want to stick to the game plan here? And so it was very easy. And so that's one of the things that I feel like I'm very skilled at, is being able to negotiate that. And then the other thing is just understanding that, like, I don't need to be right and I'm okay with being wrong. So in certain moments, if I say something, I try not to form it in a sentence. I try to form it as a question. If you want to hit a 7-iron, but I think you should hit an 8-iron, I'm not going to tell you need to hit an 8-iron here. I'm just going to say, hey, what's your carry distance on that club right now? Is that the number that you really want that ball to go, or would a different club give you a different option? And is that going to give you a better result? And so I just try to focus all my conversation more so of like asking questions. Where do you want this ball to land? How far do you want this to carry? You know, all those different things. And then I think that helps build that trust, but then also allows me to be in less of a position of confrontation necessarily, like on a golf course, because it's not about me trying to tell somebody what to do.
Collaborating and understanding their goals, and then you're the almost like a accountability to their stated goals, right? Of like their game plan. It's like, this is, hey, remember, this is kind of where your head's at, and because their competitive drive and all that's like, oh, my adrenaline's going. I think I can push this a little further. No, I love that. And the trust thing, honestly, probably while we were just at the simulator, and I backed off a couple shots because you said, hey, what about this versus that? And it's like, if I didn't trust you, I wouldn't have done that. But I hadn't known you very long, so I guess it's working. Sometimes the game itself and course management, you're helping with those decision makings. But I'd heard a story recently. I think it was a guy that played for Arizona State, and he was sick.
Yeah.
And he was debating whether to play or not. So I guess share that story, because I think there's something in that too, where it does feel it's more than just golf management. It's also just managing pressure or maybe physical illness. Like, do you care to share that story?
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually a really good story. I think that fits really well with the theme of your podcast too, because, you know, as a professional caddy working with professional golfers, it's not so much about us telling them how far to hit a golf ball or what club to hit. And a lot of times, you know, we're on-course psychologists. A lot of times, you know, we're trying to talk them off a ledge if their emotions are getting the best of them. And that was a situation where the first time that I ever got to caddy for a professional golfer, it was stage 1 of Q school. So this is a very important tournament for this gentleman. His name is James Liao. I don't think he'll mind me using his name in this situation. Great kid. He former Arizona State golfer, graduated, and now he's a professional golfer. Actually just ended up winning an Asia Development Tour event in December last year. So congratulations, James. But anyway, we went out, we played the first round of golf. I think we shot like 4 or 5 under the first round. It was a great round. We were towards the top of the leaderboard. At one point, we were actually tied for the lead. And then something happened for him between the first round and the second round. Overnight, he ended up just getting violently ill. You know, he was throwing up. He had diarrhea, like all the different things. And so, you know, I'm driving to the golf course for round 2. He's texting me, telling me how he's not feeling great and he doesn't know if he's going to play. And I said, well, just meet me at the course. I'm going to stop at the gas station. I'm going to get you some, Pedialyte, some electrolytes, some food. I'm going to get you some medicine to try to help you out a little bit. And we're standing on the tee box for the very first hole, getting ready for our tee time. And he's so ill that he's laying on the ground and he's almost stark white. Like, he's just not in a great place. And he's telling me he wants to withdraw from the tournament, which means that he doesn't get any opportunity to try to go to the next stage of Q School. And his dreams of trying to get on the Korn Ferry Tour or the PGA Tour that year are basically just thrown out the window with that one decision. And so this is where, like, being a caddy and having to manage those mental situations and being kind of like an on-course psychologist comes into play. And I had a conversation with him very quickly because we only had a couple minutes. And I said, hey, listen, like, I understand you're not feeling great. And I can't imagine how bad you feel right now, but let's at least hit this first tee shot on this first hole. We have 18 holes of golf to play. You can literally withdraw from this tournament on any one of these holes. You don't have to withdraw right now before we even start. Like, let's just hit one shot right here, see how you feel. We'll get to the ball and we'll see how you feel before the next one. And we'll just literally take this one shot at a time all day long. And he was like, okay, I agree. Let's just try to give it a shot. And, one of the other things was, I don't know if this was going to be a factor for him, but I had flown from Nashville, Tennessee to Phoenix, Arizona. I had a rental car. I was out there to caddy for him that week. And so if there was ever a thought in his mind of, I have to play right now because I feel bad that this person flew out here to caddy for me and me backing out could, like, impact him, I said to him on the tee, I said, do not let my presence here be any weight on your shoulders. Like, don't let that come into the conversation of whether you play or not, because I'm here for you. So if you want to withdraw, let's go home, dude. Like, I'm 100% okay with it. And I think he appreciated it. And I think that kind of helped with the decision-making of let's at least hit the first tee shot. But yeah, he hits this first tee shot. He walks off the tee. He goes like 50 yards to the left, throws up behind a tree. I meet him in the fairway. Like, I got to his ball before him. I get all the yardages for our second shot. He finally walks up. He doesn't want to do any math because he's just not in a good headspace. And I'm like, just hit it this far. And he goes, okay. Hits the ball inside 10 feet, makes the birdie putt, and we birdie the first hole. And I'm like, all right, cool. Like, now let's just go to the next hole and we'll take this one shot at a time. So yeah, that's how my first round of professional golf with a professional golfer. That was my first tournament with a professional golfer, and it was the second round. But that was the first time that I ever actually had to kind of step up and have a conversation to motivate or inspire somebody to, like, push through adversity, basically.
So last year you went through, and how many? What did you end up working? 13, 14 events?
Yeah, I was able to caddy 14 different events.
14 different players?
For 3 different players.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you had some repetitive.
I did, yeah. Yeah, I had the first guy that I worked with last year, I worked 5 events with him. And then during the 5th event, he had already told me before we went out there, hey, this will be the last event that I need you to help me with because my full-time caddy is going to be coming on the bag for the rest of the season. And which ends up, it's like his best friend, right? So, like, who am I to argue with him in that scenario? Like, that's the best thing that he needs. So I'm okay with it. And so while we were at that tournament, I was able to network with a caddy that was in one of our playing groups. It was the only week he was carrying the bag for the player that he was with. He was just helping him out. And I said, hey, if he needs anybody for the rest of the year, give him my contact info, tell him to call me. I'll be looking for a bag. And then a couple weeks later, that player calls me and he's like, hey, are you still available? And I said, yeah. And he goes, do you want to meet me in Kansas City and come work this event? And I was like, yep, absolutely. So drove 9.5 hours from Nashville to Kansas City, met him there. The first week that I was on the bag for him, we finished tied for 16th in Kansas City. We were in solo 4th place after the first 2 rounds. It was the best finish of his entire career. And then I ended up working 5 more events with him. So I helped him for 6 events. And then there was a third player that I worked for. I worked 3 Korn Ferry Tour playoff events for him at the end of the season. So And all of that is going back to what I said earlier, where it's a networking job, and you have to be at tournaments in front of people for them to know who you are, to not forget about you. And because I was with the first guy, I met the second guy. Because I caddied for both of them, I met the third guy throughout the season, and I was able to then build a relationship with him and reach out to him, say, hey, do you need somebody for the playoffs? So it's just one of those things where, if you want to be in the game, you got to get in the club kind of thing.
The network year one versus year two, I would imagine the confidence and much more context in your phone going into year two, I would imagine, and even just within the caddy community, like that's got to feel nice to feel a little bit, hey, I actually know people now when I show up to these locations.
Yeah, and
share
honestly,
some expenses probably.
And one of the things I think I'm really good about is, learning from each experience. And one of the things that I really look back on with my first year on the Corn Ferry Tour last year that I did not do a good job of, that I'm trying to do better this year, is I did not build that network as much as I could have. I didn't ask for people's contact information as much as I could have. I could have a network 5 times as big as what I do right now if I had just actually asked for people's contact info last year. So that's like my biggest focus this year, is every time I have an opportunity to go to an event and every time I have an opportunity to caddy for another player, I'm going to spend the time that I have when I can collecting as many people's contact information so that I can build that network larger and larger every year.
Caddying for someone you maybe don't have a ton of relational history with, but at the same time, like when you caddy, a lot of it's also understanding yardages. This is more about course management, fade versus draw. Like, I mean, all these, are you better off the tee? You better on the green? Like all these little variables. But then also, here's where my head goes. I'm sitting there, I'm like going to offer some insight. It's easy for me to look at and be like, hey, if I see a giant tree on the left, I'm filtering that through what I would do on the tee, but I'm offering insight into somebody who does not have my swing,
right?
Who does not have my ball flight, or does not have my whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
How do you get your game out of it and enter the mind of someone at that level? Because it's a whole different level, right? When you're watching them hit the ball. So I don't know. Walk us through that.
Yeah, so the fun way to answer that right off the bat is, the cool part about being a caddy for professional golfers is they can actually hit the golf ball where they want to. So
it's amazing.
It makes it real easy for me to not worry about my golf game, because we can talk about where we want the ball to land within like a 3-yard circle, and he's probably going to hit it, right? But a lot of that comes with all the time that we spend with our players on the range during practice sessions. So, talking to them about carry distances, knowing how far they hit each club, spending time on the range and seeing their shot shape. And you always get to see the tendency of, this guy hits a right to left draw, this guy hits a left to right fade. So, you learn all that, you write notes in your book, you remember that information so that when it gets out on the course, you know what their tendencies are already. And I think for me, it just comes pretty quickly. Like, I could spend an hour on the driving range with a player, have a little bit of a conversation with them, and I pretty much know how they're going to hit each golf shot, right? And then I have a pretty good idea where they're going to hit their ball as far as carry distance. So it's easy to translate that on the golf course.
When you're stepping into something new, it is really comforting when you've already referenced it so many times today, where it's like, hey, your prior history in corporate America, your sales, relational networking, all these different skill sets allowed you to hit the ground running. You weren't starting at zero when it came to caddying. There's things you had to learn, but you had a lot of carryover.
Yeah.
I love with leaders, peek behind the curtain. What are the things that you had to grow in to adapt to something new? It's like, you know what, like as a caddy, here's maybe a skill or an attribute that maybe I didn't need in corporate America, but I need more of that in my life. Yeah. Is there anything that comes to mind of how you've had to evolve or grow yourself?
One of the things I didn't think that I was going to have to focus on very much going into this when I started working with professional golfers was how much of my time was going to be spent on learning the mannerisms and the idiosyncrasies of the other caddies in our playing group. So I learned that very quickly last year, that it's not just about how I interact with the player that I'm helping that week, but I also have to be able to adjust myself with the other caddies that I'm with every single week. You know, every tournament we play the first 2 days before the first 2 days you play in the same pairings for 2 days straight. So you have two other guys and two other caddies in your group. But then if you make the cut and you go to play on the weekend, you could be paired with a completely different player in caddy on the third day. And then you could be paired with a completely different player in caddy on the fourth day. And each caddy manages their way around a golf course differently. Each caddy manages their way around the greens differently. And so picking up on all of that was something that I didn't think I was going to have to do, but I had to really quickly adjust and spend time focusing on like how I could be myself around these other people and not interfere with what they were trying to do with their player. You know what I mean?
Any embarrassing moments come to mind of those?
Yeah. Yeah. The first Corn Ferry Tour tournament that I ever worked was last year in Argentina. And one of the very first holes on the very first round, I almost stepped in the line of one of the guys in our group on the putting green. I had the flag in my hand. I knew where my guys
Practice round or real
No,
round?
no. This was tournament round.
Okay.
This was tournament round. I knew where my guy's marker was. I knew where one of the other guys in our group's ball marker was on the green, but I lost track of where the third player's ball was on the green. And as I was walking around trying to get out of everybody's way, I was about to step in his line, and one of the other caddies in the group, who was a friend of mine that was part of my network already, couldn't yell because we're in the middle of a tournament round, but he like whispered real quick, like, "Hey, stop." And as soon as he said something, I was able to take one of those big, like giant leaping steps or whatever so that I wouldn't step in his line. But that was pretty embarrassing. And then I'd say probably the most embarrassing thing that has happened to me, aside from when I fell on my face in Spain last year, was Tulum, Mexico last year. I was caddying and we were coming off of the 9th green, and there's a big gap between the 9th green and the 10th tee, so much so that they gave us a shuttle where we had to get on a golf cart and like ride a golf cart to get to the next tee box. Well, I don't know why, but like in that moment I had GI issues and I had stomach issues and I had to use the bathroom like incredibly quick. And there was a restroom that was, you know, like 100 or 150 yards off of the green. And I had to have one of the other caddies in our group hold my player's golf bag with his player's golf bag. I sprinted to the bathroom. I walk in the bathroom. One of my close friends, it's another caddy, wasn't playing at the time, was just happened to be in there washing his hands. He's like, "What are you doing, dude? Like, aren't you in the middle of a round?" And I was like, "I am." I was like, "Gotta go, dude." And I jump in a stall. I go to the bathroom real fast. The shuttle's gone at this point. Like the rest of the group is going to play the next tee. And so I wrap that up as fast as I possibly can. I get out of the bathroom and I had to run like 400 yards still to get to the next tee. And I'm like sprinting around this golf course to get to the next tee. And as I catch up to the group, they're already done teeing off. My buddy that was carrying for another player in our group is two bagging. He's carrying his guy's bag on one shoulder, my guy's bag on the other shoulder. And now I have to catch up to him in the, like on the way to the fairway. So yeah, that was probably one of the more embarrassing moments.
Without a ton of time to catch your breath, I'm sure.
No time to catch my breath. No time whatsoever.
Yeah.
Like I was absolutely exhausted and I was like panting like crazy. I was so out of breath. And the player that I was working with, he was just so cool about it. He was like laughing. He's like, "Bro, just take this hole off. I've got this. Like, don't even look at numbers. Don't look at your book. Like, just catch your breath and relax. Like, we're fine."
That's incredible.
It was the final round of the tournament too.
Oh. Social media has been an interesting world. I know you even said before you kind of started social media, kind of golf. I don't know if influencer is the right word, but I mean, it's grown quite a bit for you. So talk a little bit about like why you went that direction, how you utilize it, plug anything here. I mean, I'll plug it in the show notes as well, but how does social media play into what you're trying to accomplish in this space?
Yeah, so social media, in my opinion, it's just we're in a day and age now where if you really want to try to like put yourself in front of as many people as you can, you have to utilize social media. And I also feel like in the world of golf specifically, like more and more companies and brands are looking at players, and I don't know if they're looking at caddies, but maybe they are. And if you have a social media presence, I just feel like it can't hurt you, right? Like it can only help you. I've quickly learned though, like throughout this process that could potentially hurt me depending on what kind of information that I'm talking about on my social media page. And so I've had to kind of curate that a little bit and learn on the fly. And I might have already hurt myself a little bit at this point, but I'm just going to continue to keep pushing forward and move past that. I just looked at it like I hadn't seen anybody else going down the road of trying to become a professional caddy, like trying to get to the PGA Tour, documenting that journey of what that looks like from the caddy's perspective. You know, you see some of the biggest names in golf, like the Tony Finau's and the Scotty Schefflers and the Tiger Woods of golf. You can see those guys on TV all the time and on Netflix specials and all that stuff, right? But you very rarely even get to hear the name of the caddy that's carrying the bag for them, let alone see their face and let alone see what it's like from their perspective. And so I had a feeling that going into this season, if I could just start documenting that journey, that it might be interesting to people because nobody else out there is doing it. And so that's where the thought process came from. And that's what I'm trying to do going forward for the rest of the year.
So I know people can, and hopefully they do, they follow you after they, learn about you and your story today. You're documenting kind of like, hey, I'm on the plane, I'm arriving, I'm registering as a caddy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very real time stuff, right?
Yeah. So I did a really good job of it in the Bahamas because I was on site, and I plan on doing a good job of it again next week when I get to Argentina. But yeah, it's a lot of, day in the life, and, also doing content during a practice round when I'm walking the golf course by myself and I'm trying to scout the course and take notes in my yardage book of, showing people what it's like from my point of view of I'm walking down the middle of the fairway and these are some of the obstacles that we're going to have to plan for. And this is what this green complex looks like. And here are the notes that I'm writing myself in my yardage book, and, videos about how I prepare my yardage book so that when we get into tournament situations, I don't have to rely on doing quick math here and there, or I already have some game plan decisions kind of written down of things that we can talk about without me having to come up with it on the fly. And, I would love to talk a lot about the money aspect of it, how much I spend, how much I make, all those things. But I think that's the part where it's kind of detrimental to me a little bit currently, just because I don't have a player that I'm specifically working for. And I also don't want people to think that the only reason that I'm doing this is, to try to make a ton of money, or the only reason that I'm doing this is because I want people to feel bad for me because I spent money and, hire me because I need you to, like, all those things. So yeah, it's becoming a learning curve, and I'm having to learn it very quickly to try to navigate
I love
that.
the tension though, because it is, on this podcast, a lot of our guests, I talk about vulnerability just comes up when it comes to our humanity and leadership, and trying to calibrate that. It's like there's definitely undersharing can hurt because people don't. I mean, the whole reason you said, like, hey, I just try to develop the trust. It's hard to develop trust if you're undersharing and you're not showing a bit of yourself and your humanity. The other side, oversharing, when there's too much of that or you're too vulnerable. And so trying to find that sweet spot. And I see that. I mean, that makes a ton of sense to me when you think about the social media presence and what you want to put out there and all those things. So one of the things I appreciate when I had Josh Teeter on here, who we both know, from the golfer side, there were many times in my conversation with him where I'm talking like, hey, you're standing there, you're, on Sunday and you're T3 trying to get to T2, Pebble Beach, like pressure of the world's on you. How do you navigate that headspace? And what do you do in that moment to deliver the shot that you need to do? And one of the things he said to me is like, I know on surface level, it seems like golf's a solo sport because I have a caddy, I have a team. And so just that mentality for the golfer to have someone in their corner in that moment it really is a more of a team sport when it comes to caddy player relationship than I don't always think about that.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, would you add anything to that? Is that?
Yeah, I would say from the caddy's perspective of that same conversation that Josh Teeter's mentioning is one of the things that we have to be very good about is managing our emotions as their caddy, right? It is a team thing. And our biggest priority is trying to help our players always make the best decision for every shot and every moment, right? Knowing that we can't tell them what to do and that we can't hit the ball for them. But navigating those moments where they're maybe making a little bit more of an emotional decision than a logical decision, right? And trying to guide them down the road of like, we need to be a little smarter here. But the biggest thing is not getting overly excited when they do something really well and not getting deflated when something doesn't go right. And I think that's the part that most people are never going to get to experience from the caddy's perspective, because it's never shown on TV and it's never talked about in media. It's never talked about in interviews. The first tournament that I worked for was last year in Argentina. Okay. Every single professional golf tournament, you play the first 2 rounds, and then whoever has the lowest score after the first 2 rounds, they take the top 65 players and a couple ties, and they get to play the next 2 days, round 3 and round 4.
Guaranteed money.
Guaranteed money, but guaranteed. The other thing that's more important for the players is the points that they get on the points list for that year. Because if you finish in the top 20 in points at the end of the season, then you earn a PGA Tour card. So for them, it's more about the points and less about the money. But if you don't make the cut line, or if you don't finish in those top 65 spots after the first 2 rounds, you go home and you don't make any money and you don't get any points. So my first tournament ever working for a professional golfer on the Corn Ferry Tour, it's the last hole of our second round. We had just come off of 2 bogeys in the previous 3 holes to put us, our score was right at the cut line, where if we finish the last hole with a par or better, we get to play the next 2 days. If we make one more bogey, we're going home and we can't finish the weekend. And having that pressure of like, this is incredibly important, being able as a caddy to manage your emotions, have the conversation about what your player wants to hit off the tee, where they want to land it, without letting those nerves impact your voice or how you communicate. But then watching my player hook a tee shot into the trees off the tee and put us in a bad position, and have to walk up to the ball, and he's dealing with all of the emotions of that out loud, and you're right there next to him and you're with him, but I can't let that impact me as a caddy. I have to be able to be his rock. I have to stay steady. I have to stay confident. I have to be positive, right? Then we get to the ball and we have a second shot that we hit a tree branch in front of us and it lands 40 feet in front of us. And now we're hitting our third shot on a par 4. We have to get it in the hole in the next 2 shots, and we're still 115 yards away from the hole. So now we have to hit a wedge shot. It goes over the back of the green up against a grandstand. And now we're in a situation where percentage wise, we're not going to make a par. We're going to miss the cut and it's going to be the end of the week. Right. But again, as a caddy, I have to stay calm. I have to stay present. I have to stay reassuring in that moment. And I'll tell you exactly what happened in that moment. That was when I absolutely just shut up. Like after that third shot, in that moment, being a caddy and knowing when to say something is not as important as knowing when not to say something. And he needed to be able to manage that situation on his own without any input from me. And it was a situation where it was like, I just need to carry the clubs and I need to get out of his way and let him do what he was going to do. So now we've got a 30-yard chip shot. He has to make it to make the cut that week. And he just looks at me and he goes, hey man, I'm just going to bump this into that hill. It's going to turn a little to the right and it's going to go in the hole. And I was like, cool, man, let's see it. And I just got out of the way real fast and he chips this ball. It goes in the hole and he lets out the loudest scream you could ever imagine. I'm freaking out. I let out the craziest roar. Like it was one of the most intense moments of my entire life. And it was so cool to be a part of that, dude. But like, that's the part that being a team and the caddy perspective is, you know, he hits that first shot. What am I going to do? Be like, oh man, I can't believe it. And like start pouting.
He knows
like
it's not ideal, right?
Exactly. That's not going to help him. He hits the second shot. We get a bad break and we hit a tree branch that we're not planning on hitting. What am I going to do? Be like, God, man, I can't believe you didn't just hit that out to the right a little bit more. Or like, why didn't you hit that a little higher? All those things are going to be bad. And so that's the part that no one's ever going to be able to know what that's like because it doesn't get documented.
They're at this level for a reason.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, I like how you said, you know, I'm not going to give him any input that's going to help him in his decision making. Yeah. You know, let his intuition and instincts take over.
I think being married helps too, because any husband probably knows what I'm about to say, but there are some times when your wife is saying things to you and she's just quote unquote venting and she doesn't need you to try to fix her problem. She just wants to be able to get it out and say it and just have somebody listen to it, but you don't need to say anything in that moment. And no matter what you say, if you do say something right then and there, it's just going to make her more mad. That's a lot of what we have to do when we're on the golf course too, is you just have to know this is a moment where I need to not say anything and just let them work through it.
Yeah, give it space. I know Mondays are a big deal, especially for your world. I mean, that's like the first, my assumption is that's the first day people are kind of getting to that course for that week. And all the prep and kind of what's a normal Monday look like when you're showing up and you don't have a certain player that's already locked in or you're already kind of going to be carrying for? What's that look like?
Yeah. So for me, not having a player to work for, I'm going to get there and I'm just going to try to gain access to the golf course. And I'm just going to walk the golf course by myself and just prepare myself as best that I can for what I need to know that week. And then that way, if I get a player to work for, I'll be ready to go because I've already seen what I need to see, no matter who I'm working with. And then aside from that, it'll be talking to the caddy master. Hey, let me know if anybody needs somebody last minute. And then it'll be a lot of time spent either in the front of the building, waiting for guys to come in and just seeing if anybody needs anything, or maybe more time spent on the practice putting green and the driving range, because that's where you'll see guys that are actually hitting golf balls. And if they don't have a caddy on the bag, then it's easy to just walk up and say, hey, do you have somebody this week? And if they do, then it's like, all right, cool. But if they don't, then you can have a conversation with them at that point and say, hey, I'm here. I'm looking for somebody. I'm available. If I can help you out, I'd love an opportunity. So yeah, my Monday is probably going to be spent more so hanging out around the practice putting green and around the driving range and just trying to see who's out there that doesn't have somebody on the bag for him and just talking to him face to face and asking if I can help him out.
Does Corn Ferry do like a Monday qualifier?
Corn Ferry does have Monday qualifiers for certain tournaments. They don't have as many now this year as they used to in the past. That's one of the things that has kind of changed in their rules. They're eliminating some of those Monday qualifiers, which is a real big bummer for the players. But I'm not 100% sure. I think Argentina and Chile had Monday qualifiers. I think they were at golf courses that are here in Florida just because of like the travel to get there. Like they did those qualifiers sooner than they would normally do. But when we get to the United States and we have tournaments here in the US, those Monday qualifiers, those are on the Monday of the tournament week.
Another big reason that you would want to be there on a Monday, I'm sure, right?
Yeah.
I want to make sure we have space to talk about just your nonprofit work and passion and what you and your wife are up to. So share a little bit about that, what started that, the vision behind it. I'd love to give you a chance to plug that.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you bringing that up. Ties back into the question that you asked about social media earlier. And my thought has always been, if I could grow a big enough following on a personal social media page, then it'll allow me to be able to then talk more about the nonprofit that my wife and I created. So back in 2019, we created a nonprofit. It's a federally recognized 501c3. It's called New to You. It's the idea is that we're trying to partner with local businesses here in Nashville to provide food, clothing, housing, and basic daily needs for foster children and foster family in Tennessee. To this point, I think over the last 5 years, we've been able to raise over $100,000 in just straight donations. We've raised thousands of pounds of canned food that we've been able to donate to other organizations, tons of clothing, backpacks, suitcases, all these things that we're able to provide to other organizations in Nashville that give them directly to foster families. So it's been a passion project of ours. We're taking it very slowly. My wife and I are the only two that are really associated with it. We do have a board of directors. Some of our close friends and people that we trust are part of that board of directors. But we don't take any kind of salary. We're not taking any kind of money. We structured it based off of the same concept of St. Jude Children's Hospital, where we want 100% of any kind of monetary donation to go directly towards the mission that we have of helping foster children. And, there's a organization that we work with the most currently called Connect South Central. And they basically send us daily needs for foster children, for mothers that are potentially going to lose their children going into foster care for one reason or another. And, one of the things that most people probably don't think about when it comes to foster kids is a lot of children end up in the foster care system because there were situations that were potentially preventable before they went into the foster care system. So if you're a single mother and you have two children and you can't make your rent and you get evicted from your house, then DCS can take your children and put them in foster care because they can say that you're not fit to raise your kids in that moment, right? So some of the requests that we might get are, hey, this person needs help covering their mortgage, or this person needs help covering their rent. And by doing that, we're able to prevent those children from ever entering the foster care system in the first place, which is dramatically helpful to them in their home situation. But then we do things like providing bedding. So we get requests for tragic accident where parents are killed in a car accident and now their children have to go live with their grandmother. Well, their grandmother wasn't prepared to take on 3 children at that point in her life. And so now she needs beds for these children. She needs bed sheets, pillows, all those things. So then we can, we can use that money that's donated to us to go pay for them to get bedding. We get requests of, hey, I've got 5 foster kids and I need a new washing machine, so we can buy washers and dryers, refrigerators. We've been able to help a handful of children with college scholars, like college tuition. So we're in the process of trying to figure out how we want to structure a scholarship program to help with that. But currently we're just getting needs here and there where kids are like, hey, I'm graduating high school and I want to go to this trade school, but I need X amount of dollars to get in. And so we're able to meet that need to help those kids because, if you're a foster kid and you turn 18 and you get kicked out of the system and you have no family to support you, you're trying to figure out so many things on your own by yourself that we're just trying to have as much of an impact as we can on people as possible. So if you're listening to this, if you guys are interested in learning more about what we're trying to do, you can go to newtoyoucharity.org, NEWTOYOU charity.org. You can learn about our organization. Again, 100% nonprofit. We don't make any money off of it. We don't pay ourselves any kind of a salary or anything like that. So, there are direct links in there. If you guys want to donate clothing, you can email us, ask how to do that. If you want to donate suitcases, duffel bags, if you want to donate money, there's direct links where you can donate money online, but every little bit helps. And, we have a 5K, 10K run coming up here in April. My wife puts together every year. My wife is an ultra marathon runner. And so she wanted to do something to help our charity, but also do something that is part of her passion. And so she's putting together a 5K, 10K run walk, depending on how much of an athlete you want to be that day. But registration is available on our website right now. You can go to Ultra Sign Up and you can look for Faster for Foster 5K, 10K in Thompson Station, Tennessee, coming up in April. If you guys want to sign up and register, you can come out, you can meet us in person, and you can just kind of have a good day and hang out.
I love that. Yeah, and I'll make sure all the links to those are in the show notes on all the different platforms as well. Incredible work, I think, from a standpoint of just the generational impact, and it's one of those. I love hearing you talk about it because clearly there's passion there, and I don't know what prompted that specific lane to talk about. And you don't have to share that, but when it comes to meeting people's needs and that kind of work, you're never fully going to know the impact of it, right? It's like I worked with teenagers for a long time, and it was like sometimes it's 10, 15 years down the road before you really see. It's like, oh, that was impactful, and sometimes you never know, but just kind of having that heart to serve others, man, that's powerful. So however we can amplify that. So check out that work, check out different ways to support those kids. Definitely love that. Well, I know from a standpoint of our conversation, I really, again, just want to iterate to you. I appreciate your sharing some of this real-time journey that you're in the middle of, right? And I shared this with you prior. It's admirable and inspirational. We're all going to get in those moments in life where you kind of step out in faith in yourself, and you and your wife's dynamic and that support, all of that's so inspiring because there's no clear picture or timeline of what this is going to look like for you, but taking that step, it definitely it takes some mental resilience, and I think that all of us should and can be inspired by your story.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I know for me right now, it's a little bit of a mental challenge at the moment right now because of the uncertainty of where I'm at and, being so passionate and wanting to do something so badly and not being able to do it right now currently is tough. But I try to live my life on the basis of I never want to look back later in life and wonder what if, and I never want to have the regret of like, could something have come of it if I didn't try? And, like any other sports analogy, we'll focus on golf. You miss every putt. If the ball never gets to the hole, you're going to miss every single putt that you take. And so I'm putting myself out there. I'm trying to accomplish something that I really am passionate about and that I really love doing. And at the end of the day, I understand that it may not work out the way that I want it to. And I'm okay with that because I'm at least trying. So when I have those moments, of mental struggle and I have those moments of feeling down about, where I'm at, I just remind myself if I never tried, the answer would have always been no in the first place. And if I never tried, it would have never happened regardless. And so I'm just comfortable in the fact that I'm putting myself out there and I'm doing it because at the end of the day, if I have to go back to work in a normal corporate job, I have a resume that'll allow me to do that anytime I need to. So why not take advantage of it now? We only live one life and we only have so much time that's not guaranteed to us on this planet. So, I don't want to have that worry or that thought in my head later in life of like, man, what could have happened if I had just done that,
That's well said. Well, that's a good spot. I think to land the conversation. Do you want to plug any of your socials?
Yeah, if you guys want to follow me on Instagram, it's at Ryan Murray, which is spelled RyanMrry. And then if you want to follow me on TikTok, it's Ryan Murray _Caddy. So that's Ryan RYAN Murray MURRAY _Caddy CADDIE, or you can just search Ryan Murray and you'll probably find me on there. But yeah, and then again, if you want to look at our charity, you can go to newtoyoucharity.org, or you can find us on Instagram at newtoyoutn. And then you can find our Facebook account from there as well.
Yeah, and we'll put all that in the show notes, but man, really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it. It was a blast.